I looked around for someone else to blame. I searched and I reached down inside. And I knew when I found there's a light I can hide. I can be free. I can be free. I can rise above. I can be free. I can be free. I will rise above. When you're all alone.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Duncan McCollum coming to you from Santa Cruz. What a great day to be here, and so happy to be able to be talking to you all here on the Santa Cruz Voice. I had a great opportunity to meet with some of the other contributors to the Santa Cruz Voice this weekend over at Michael Olson's house. And it was just really fun to see and meet other people that have a sorry, it wasn't turned on. Hi, this is Dr. Duncan McCollum. I'm so happy to be here. And, it's Santa Cruz Voice. And I just want to let you know, I had the opportunity to spend some time with some of the other um, voices on the Santa Cruz Voice this weekend. And it's just neat to find out what everybody, what their passions are, what their goals are, what they're trying to do to make this world a better place. And we have a great opportunity through this broadcast to reach people that otherwise may not get reached. So, it's just such a cool thing to be able to talk to the community. And, my goal is to help people with their health. I've written several books, but my book, Turn Back Your Biological Clock, really is the focus of this show. I call it Your Health, Your Choice. But really, if you could turn back your biological clock and find out what is causing you to age quicker than you would like, and if there's any things that you could do to change it, then that would be value to you, I believe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about toxicity today because I was listening to another show the other day, and the focus was, what's going on this planet geothermically, geopolitically. A lot of talk about, the evolution of a planet, all the volcanoes that are going off underwater over in Europe, what's happening to our atmosphere via the cloud um, seeding, if you believe in that or not. But we do know that there's a lot of aluminum coming down from the airplanes because they're using it in their jet fuel to make the planes more um, readily, gives them better gas mileage. So the point is that there's a lot of stuff that's affecting our health. And if you want to be one of the ones that are going to come out on top, I mean, we should all come out on top, right? There's no real benefit in us surviving and the other people not. So we really want to take everybody with us up to the top of our health potential and keep us there. But it's very clear that the ones that aren't going to make it are the ones that are the weakest on the chain, the weakest links. And those things we can change that. We can alter that. We can make ourselves potentially healthier than we were, a month ago, 5 years ago, by understanding first and foremost what are the factors that keep us healthy or make us sick. What are the factors that make us get um, older quicker than other people or older quicker than our genetic line should get? We all have wear and tear. We all have terrible stresses in our environment. And just when you think everything's going right, the next shoe drops, the next foot drops, and you just kind of sometimes feel like giving up. What's the use? What's the point? And, I would say on one end, if you don't have that feeling, maybe that's great, but also maybe you're not pushing yourself far enough. One of the things that I always like is I kind of figure that the way that coal is turned into diamonds is by pressure, constant pressure over a long period of time. Now, we don't want to have enough pressure to overwhelm us and make us sick, but we also don't want less pressure to underwhelm us and make us sick. So there's a sweet point of stress. There's a sweet point of stress that will keep our bodies functioning, turning over the bad cells quicker, making sure that our brain is alert and functioning well. Because if there was no stresses in our life, our brain and our alert warning system would not work. And then all of a sudden, here comes an emergency and we're not prepared for it. So our body responds well to stress as long as it is, pretty much recognizable or of the same type of stress we've already been exposed to. Some of the insidious, dangerous stresses are the ones that we can't see, hear, touch, feel, or taste. And that's what happened with the 2020 debacle that came down. You didn't know where it was, when it was, who it was, why it was, or if it was. But that uncertainty was enough to make you sick and made a lot of people's already weakened health conditions get weaker by the sheer fact of an unknown stressor can get the best of you and make you sick. So we want to learn how to make our bodies as healthy as possible. So I'm going to talk a bit about that today. And we've all had our pathways, we've all gone down certain roads. And when it comes down to the end, it's like what actually got us the farthest and taught us the most is what's going to get us well. So, I think I'm going to read a portion of my book, New Hope for Sciatica. This is why I do what I do. This message right here, it's called How Do I Know? My Journey to Me, How Did I Know? And, you know, it's really kind of like an awakening that we all need to have at some point in our life if we're going to ever amount to a hill of beans, stealing a line out of Humphrey Bogart movie. I think it was To Have and Have Not, but I could be wrong on that. You're not going to amount to a hill of beans unless you do the things necessary to get you there. And sometimes you don't even know where it is you're going or what you're trying to achieve. And hopefully that vision will become a little bit clearer as you move along. I was talking to a young chiropractor from Germany the other day, and she's practicing in New York. And we started talking about what she wants, and it was very interesting. She told me that she got her chiropractic license 2 weeks before she turned 23. That is unbelievable because there's like 6 or 7 years of college to get your prereqs done and get through chiropractic college. And so I started talking to her and asking her, well, how did this happen? She said, well, my mother is a neurologist in Germany. Okay. And she said that her mother had noticed that a lot of the patients, and she had mentioned Parkinson's patients, Alzheimer's patients, chronic disease patients. This is what this neuropathist, I'll remember how to say it in a minute, found in Germany with her patients. So she encouraged her daughter to look into it, and she did. But so I thought that was very interesting that a neurologist would tell her daughter to go into chiropractic. So anyway, I'm talking to her, and she's now been in practice for a couple of years, and I go, wow, that's amazing to know what you want to do and go through the rigorous schooling of chiropractic versus, just getting a job and making a living. I mean, it's pretty torturous. I think last week I talked about the amount of hours a medical doctor has versus a chiropractor, and we studied about the same hours as the general medical doctor. We just have higher amounts of education and the things that are more important for us and a lot less in drugs because we don't give drugs. So anyway, this is Dr. Duncan McCollum. This is Turn Back Your Biological Clock Radio. And you can always hear my podcast if you ever want to on McCollum Wellness Radio Podcast. So there's over 200 of them on there, and they're just filled with all different subjects regarding health, and but all leading to a natural way to improve yourself. And so I encourage you to look into it or go to one of two websites. If you're more interested in nutrition or detoxification, go to mccollumwellness.com. We have a lot of courses on there you can take, books, information that will guide you to getting the toxins out of your body. If you're more interested in structural stuff like peripheral neuropathy and or chiropractic, go to mccollumfamilychiropractic.com. And they're different because one is virtual and the other is brick and mortar. And the virtual obviously can go outside the Santa Cruz borders a lot easier than the brick and mortar. But this path for me started because of being a terrible ruin in my life before I even knew what that was. Just a happy-go-lucky young kid, all of a sudden going down a path of um, basically a miserable childhood, dotted with times of fun. But the ultimate path was pretty devastating. So I'm just going to, because you all are kind of getting to know me a little better here. I don't necessarily mean to talk about myself, other than you can find out that I know what a lot of you are going through. I've been through a tremendous amount of stuff myself, and I've come out pretty well. I'm still working on it. 69 years old, work in progress. I had a gentleman send me an email the other day from Washington State. He said, "Hey, I'm 69 and I listened to your show. It's really great to hear about it." And he loved my vitamin G that I talk about here, the 100% gratitude as well. So anyway, here we go. My first inkling that something was wrong came about in first grade. We were learning how to make letters on that big lined paper. I had a yellow crayon in my hand and had just crafted a perfect letter, quote, C, unquote. Miss Dworkin looked at my work and immediately proclaimed that I had did it wrong. It was backwards. I was confused and remained so for several years. That one thing made me confused. Rather than explain to me that the C pointed the other way, I was quickly labeled dyslexic and thrown down a long, dark, and humiliating path. So in the early 1960s, dyslexia was a new diagnosed disease. And they used to say that the optic chiasm didn't flip the words around, and I bought it. However, things got worse because in third grade, when we were in circle time reading See Spot Run out loud to each other, and I don't know if they still do that, there was a boy named John next to me who was completely blind sitting right next to me. John had just finished reading a beautiful passage about Spot with only his fingers, mind you, and it was my turn. However, I could not read a thing on the page. I remember the sinking feeling inside me as the rest of the class looked on with so many different expressions. That experience stayed with me, haunting me in my unconsciousness for decades. Shortly thereafter, my family moved out of our small town in Berkeley and moved to a place called Piedmont, about 20 minutes away. So I was away from the constant restimulation brought on by that moment in Emerson, where I went to school. As anybody whose family relocated can tell you, this is trying time to get through by itself. And I'll talk more about that a little later. The next wake-up call came at age 12. It was raining Saturday morning, and I was visiting my two best friends, Billy and Andy. They were twins. But Andy was born 20 minutes earlier. For some reason, they were known as Billy and Andy. And that was what we always called them, Billy and Andy. Anyway, we were up on Tightwad Hill above the Cal Berkeley football stadium trying to watch a Cal Stanford game. This is a huge rivalry in the Bay Area known as the Big Game, and it was not to be missed. As it was obvious the rain was not going to help, Billy and Andy produced what is called a tube tent from somewhere. This was a cylindrical plastic tube you would take backpacking back in the day. You'd run a rope through it and tie each into a tree, creating a shelter from weather. Boy, backpacking equipment has come a long way. The cylinder shape of the tube had only two openings, and since Billy and Andy held those positions and would not share, I decided to climb up a tree to get a better vantage point. As fate would have had it, I apparently used very bad judgment in choosing the branch for my perch. When Cal got a touchdown, again and opposing against the opposing team, it was tradition that a cannon located close by on Hill would go boom, proclaiming the score. My excitement for the score and my knee-jerk reaction to the sudden explosion created enough force to overcome the tensile strength of my perch. Suddenly, the branch I sat on snapped, propelling me 25 feet down to a steeply sloped, rain-soaked hillside. I landed in a seated position and then slid several feet down a muddy slope. I remember not being able to move or get a decent breath of air. Not only was the wind knocked out of me, but if I tried to move, searing pain shot through my body. It took a moment for Bill and Andy to understand the extent of my injuries, and that was bad enough, and that it was bad enough that it would require them to exit the warm, dry comfort of their tube tent to render first aid. It also meant that they were likely to miss the results of the big game. Finally, realizing that I could not walk on my own, they carried me, one on each side, in a 3/4 mile back to our home. My parents were happily engaged in one of their traditional big game cocktail parties and already imbibing their martinis and crumpets. So they paid little attention to just another injury of their accident-prone son who came home. I think I was given aspirin and shooed off to the TV room. In those days, little kids were to be seen and not heard. In the crowd of guests at the house that day were at least a handful of medical doctors, all friends of the family, and most of them were neighbors. Eventually, my mom did take me to the doctor, one of her friends. The doctor concluded that I had a sprained my back and would heal in a few days. As a young kid, your only role models are your parents. If they did not pay attention to your pain other than feeding you dope, you simply began to think that your condition is normal. Pain becomes a part of your day. Pain becomes a part of your day. Trying to do things like Trying to do things like be comfortable on the couch, watching TV, or even trying to sleep was hampered by the varying degrees of toothache lower back pain. Even though the pain level would vary, it was always there. I remember the first couple weeks in seventh grade. All the guys were trying out for football, and Coach Minter had us flat on our backs on the field doing old-style sit-ups. This caused excruciating pain for me. I recalled the unapproving look in his eyes as he watched me struggle. It was like he thought I was being lazy, or like he decided right then and there I was not one of the chosen. I felt like an outcast. I thought he had just stopped seeing me. There were days it wasn't so bad. I could run and play tree tag, flying through the branches of the oak trees at the top of the Piedmont Park. But in the evenings, I would pay the price, often with searing pain and leg pain coupled with degrees of depression. This, of course, would lead to my continued consumption of various illicit substances purchased in the darkened sections of the Piedmont Park as an attempt to cover up both my physical and mental pain associated with my broken body. Today, I have so much compassion for children and am constantly blown away by parents who say, "Oh, he's so young. How could he possibly have back pain?" Oh, believe me, he can. For the next several years, my complaints fell on calloused ears with fingers pointing to a bottle of aspirin or some other form of painkiller. All the drugs did was mask the pain at best. The pain never went away. In 1969, I was just turning 14, living in the Bay Area. Telegraph Avenue, which bordered Berkeley campus, was in turmoil. The Berkeley riots in protest and the Vietnam War was in full swing. Then on May 15th of that year, a day remembered as Bloody Thursday, Governor Ronald Reagan unleashed California's National Guard guard on demonstrators, and all hell broke loose. Sounds familiar. As the guard shot through the crowd, a student was killed and another blinded. Finally, Cal's Berkeley student body was accompanied by thousands of other sympathizers, numbering over 30,000 from around the country, into a town which was scarcely over 100,000 at the time. A line was drawn, and you were either on the side of the left or the flower children, protesters, or on the right side of the right, conservatives and warmongers. Needless to say, I fell to the left. With this move started my 14-year experience with every kind of mind-altering and body-numbing drug imaginable. Frankly, I was lucky to survive. Turn on, tune in, drop out became the battle cry of the new counterculture era. This was a phrase popularized by the psychologist Timothy Leary as he spoke in front of 30,000 hippies in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. I didn't necessarily find a drug that would relieve my pain, but I was definitely distracted from reality, which in itself was welcome at the time. I started taking drugs that could be procured in the streets near Telegraph Avenue. As early as 1968, I began paying attention to the words of Grace Slick as she sang the Jefferson Airplane song, White Rabbit. You can fill in the blanks. And so for the next 14 years, I followed the suggestions of the lyrics of that song and began my quest to replace the essentially ineffective pills my mother provided me to lose myself in the psychedelic, euphoric promise of an emerging generation. At age 20, I was a proud owner of a 1959 Dodge half-ton pickup, and that I had purchased from my friend Andy a couple years earlier. This made me everybody's friend. One day, two friends approached and offered to buy beer if they could use my truck to move a piano they were given. I couldn't turn down a free beer, so I agreed to help them move the piano. So we drank the case of Busch Bavarian Talls and then headed off to get the piano. That's the way you did it in those days. Since I was the biggest and had no idea that it wasn't normal to live in constant lower back pain, I took the back end of the upright grand while my two buddies took the front. As we worked the piano out of the garage, the two guys in front said, "Okay, we're clear, pick it up." So I lifted my end of the piano only to hit the top of the garage door. I was in a stooped, precarious position when it hit, and my back gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. I re-injured my back badly. This left me flat on my back on the living room floor of my house in excruciating pain. I lay there for 3 weeks. Nothing helped, and I mean nothing. I had access to almost any and all drugs on the market, both legal and illegal, but nothing touched my pain. As I lay there on the floor, my friends Joni gave me a massage and fixed me meals. I don't think I ate much, and as much as I liked Joni, the massages didn't help. The bigger problem was I hadn't had a bowel movement in a week, and I was beginning to get scared. The pain in my low back was at a 15 out of 10, and the burning down my legs was intolerable. It was about this time I truly considered ending my life. I was hopelessly handicapped at 21 years old. I had been in pain for 8 years, and nobody seemed to believe me or really care. I was considering my options when my two friends walked in and decisively told me they were taking me to a chiropractor they knew. A what? I thought. I had grown up in the medical doctor community of Berkeley in the 60s. Chiropractic at that time was a four-letter word spelled incorrectly, and that is quack. As I tried to protest, my two friends picked this ugly, moth-eaten green couch I had hauled down from my dad's house in the Bay Area, and they put it in the back of my pickup. Then, against my will, they picked me up. I remember screaming from the motion. They put me on that couch in the back of my own pickup truck and started driving me away to my destiny. The next thing I knew, my friends carried me into some office where this beautiful Midwestern goddess handed me some paperwork to fill out. If it weren't for her angelic lily white complexion and her snow white mannerisms, I would have tried to crawl away, scratching my way out with my fingers, which were the only things that worked at the time. Soon I was carried into Dr. York's back office. Wow, that what a scary moment. He was dressed in polyester pants and wore a white patent leather belt and similar shoes. His shirt was unbuttoned, one too many buttons, and his short hair crop was scary. As I explained the piano incident to him, he nodded and took notes. After poking around on my back, Dr. York told me he needed x-rays of me. This was a problem because I hadn't been able to stand for 3 weeks. With some convincing from Dr. York, my friends held me up in front of the doc and held me up as this doctor took x-rays of my back. Doctor in parentheses, because I hated doctors. Nobody'd help me ever. Then Dr. York disappeared behind a door labeled dark room. I had no idea what that meant, but I remember strange noises coming out of there, and I couldn't help thinking of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It was that strange. After what seemed like an hour in the dark room, the doctor walked out and put an x-ray up on the light box. He pointed to a spot on the x-ray and said the magic words that would change my life forever. When did you break your back? He was the first doctor in all those years to take my pain seriously. I burst into tears. No one had diagnosed the crushed vertebra in my back on all those years. All they offered me were lousy drugs that didn't even touch my pain. Now it became very clear to me that the deleterious effects of all those drugs I had consumed would never fix the problem and would only cover up the symptoms. As time went on, I began to realize the drug's effects in regards to my inability to read, thus furthered my dyslexia diagnosis from the first grade. What he said next scared the hell out of me, but as a result, it changed my life forever. Now remember, I could not stand up at all, and I was suffering from terrible back pain that also shot down my right leg. I hadn't had a bowel movement in a week, and I was seriously considered a dark and permanent alternative. I didn't want to live life like that, but Dr. York said 5 words that gave me hope. I think I can help. He went on to explain that the old fractured vertebra was basically pancaked so many years ago. It was like squashed. However, because I was young at the time of the injury, the bone was still green and quote unquote. So when they broke, it squished kind of like silly putty. He said that if it happened as a grown-up, mature bone, it would have snapped into fragments. He said I was lucky I was young when the accident happened. Yikes. Next, Dr. York talked about my bowel functions, and he said that the new injury from lifting the piano caused the bones and the soft tissue to squeeze up against the spinal cord. He said that this was likely pressing not only on the nerves and causing pain, but also on the nerves controlling my bowels. He said he would be willing to try to give me a chiropractic adjustment to move the bone off the nerve, but only under the promise that I would immediately go to the emergency room if it didn't work. The Golden Gate Bridge option sounded better as he went along. However, Dr. York did have me sign a paper in the effect that I would go to the hospital if the adjustment failed to work. My friends were held responsible to drive me there as well. I was scared to death, so I agreed to his terms. Next thing I know, Dr. York placed me on his adjusting table in a side position, and before I knew what happened, he jumped on my back. There was a loud snap, a jolt, and pain ran down my legs. I felt like I was about to black out. I hated doctors at this point and had no regard for this guy. I'd had it. A rush of adrenaline had jumped in me to my feet, and I was about to hit or lambaste him. Suddenly, I realized I was standing on my own 2 feet for the first time in 3 weeks. I was stunned, dumbfounded, and ecstatic all at once. I was still in pain, but it paled in comparison to the pain I'd been carried in with. I began to cry. As Dr. York explained what occurred, I felt hope for the first time in years. He described the term something like this. When some kind of physical, chemical, or mental force is exerted on the body and the resulting trauma can have a major or minor effect. Oftentimes, the trauma is such that one or more spinal vertebrae slip out of place or get misaligned. He called it a subluxation. Sub means less than, lux means light, ation, so a condition of less light. He said that usually within a few days, the body will recover the spinal segments, will soon regain 100% of its own expected motion, and the communication centers of the body will be intact, and all will be well. He explained that occasionally the body cannot right itself from the trauma and that the vertebra does not regain proper motion or function. At that point, the spinal segment will start to break down, kind of like a tiny cavity in your tooth beginning to form. And just like a cavity, the subluxation can go undetected. That is, until the moment it hits a nerve. I've had plenty of toothaches and understand that concept only too well. So when he explained how a misaligned vertebra can compress the delicate spinal nerves, causing any kind of disruption of the communication to and from the brain, I got it. I realized that I had experienced all three types of trauma in my life. A physical, falling out of a tree or crushing my fifth lumbar. Chemical, all the drugs and alcohol I had consumed to try to rid myself of the pain. Mental, the anguish associated with wondering if I would ever get well again, as well as any other tricks my mind played on me. All of these things combined were responsible for my ill health. Then I could see a path of hope. I was interested. Over the next few weeks and in the next several years, Dr. York continued to talk to me about chiropractic and this concept of the subluxation. So that is my story on how I became a chiropractor and getting carried into Dr. York's office. And it took me a little while to get it. I was young and impressionable but not so smart. Many times I would expect that, I would one adjustment and I would feel better. But then sure enough, the pain would come back. And finally, after several trips over several years to see Dr. York, I finally said, I'm sick of this. How can I get this handled? And he said, you need to do a series of visits and to a point to where we got it confirmed that your body's now healed as good as it can get. Then you just need to keep it there. You got to maintain it like you do your teeth or your car. So I finally got the message, and after going through corrective care, hi Cece, I I actually decided to become a chiropractor. But then I had the problem of not being able to read. All those years of dyslexia and the drugs that I had taken to try to get myself out of pain had made me pretty illiterate. In fact, when I did the SATs in 10th or 11th grade, I think I did them so bad, and I was high at the time that they told my dad, your son is an idiot. I couldn't fill him out. So, it was a my own rough beginning. We've all had our own, but that's my story. But I finally went through chiropractic school and I studied. I found a friend that helped me, Fernando Luque from Peru, incredibly brilliant guy. And we studied from Cabrillo, all of my physics classes, all my chemistry classes, um, calculus classes, then all the way through chiropractic school. If it wasn't for him, I may not have made it because he was such a brilliant student and helped me learn how to live and be healthy. So at any rate, that is my chiropractic story. I'm taking on the Santa Cruz Voice. I'm putting on a 3-minute commercial, but I'm going to stay on this version, this show. So, I read this because I want people to take a look at your own health. What is it that you've been ignoring or not paying attention to? What symptoms have you been covering up with medications? Oftentimes people are on 5, 10, 12 plus medications. And a lot of the things that we treat in my office these days have to do with the chronic effects of too many drugs or other toxins over a period of time. We do a lot of peripheral neuropathy treatments. That's when the nerves in your hands and feet start to die or decay. and you get numbness, tingling, difficulty walking, feel like you're going to fall, tight wad around your feet. You don't want to use the foot drive because you don't know if your foot's on the gas pedal or on the brake. There's so many different things people come in with, and they're afraid to tell their family because they don't want to lose their independence. But all this peripheral neuropathy is the end result of chronic disease. People that have had chemotherapy, radiation treatment, other types of medications, high blood pressure, a lot of your medications, if you look at the side effects, can be a side effect is peripheral neuropathy. Now, don't stop taking your medications. Go talk to your doctor about what you may be able to do and ask them about it. And is there a way that I can actually make my body healthier rather than just continue to medicate the symptoms? So that's why I would recommend my book, Turn Back Your Biological Clock, that you can get on Amazon. You can turn back the hands of time. You can improve many areas of your health. And in fact, in the book, it talks about different ways that you can get your body functioning again. You can get the heavy toxicity out of your body. All disease is related to chronic inflammation. Inflammation at the cellular level. We have 75 million cells in our body. Trillion. Let me go up a couple zeros. 75 trillion cells in our body, and they're all controlled by the 31 nerves that come out of your back. And when you end up being exposed to the chemicals we have in our lifetime that we didn't even know were bad for us at the time, the forever chemicals like, you know, the there's so many of them that you put on your furniture so you can clean up the spills on the carpet. You cook with it so nothing sticks. And a lot of these things are unstable and they end up getting in your body and they get into your brain and they affect your brain. They affect your the blood-brain barrier gets affected, and then you start to get all kinds of stuff in your brain. Then you get these other chemicals like Roundup or glyphosate that you're getting in your food that's not organic. It is on your food. If you don't know about it, just look it up. And that glyphosate goes through the blood-brain barrier and gets those toxic chemicals deeper into your brain. A lot of people have diabetes, and 60% of the of the population are diabetic or pre-diabetic. And what that means is you've got too much insulin in your blood because insulin is the issue. They give you insulin to get the sugar out of your blood into the cells. Well, once you have too much insulin in your blood, it's called hyperinsulinemia. Another term for that is Alzheimer's disease or diabetes type 3. Just go ahead and look it up, Google it. It's actually when this insulin is crossing the blood-brain barrier and putting plaque down on the memory nerves in your brain. So how do you turn this back? Well, you got to clean the body up. You got to get the inflammation out of your body. This is Dr. Duncan McCollum, McCollum Wellness Radio. I'm on Santa Cruz Voice, and get the book Turn Back Your Biological Clock so it can help you. But the thing is that we've got to look at what we're putting in our body. So first of all, fasting is amazing if you haven't ever skipped a meal. I remember the first time I was told to do it in the classes I was going with Dr. Dan Papa. I'm going, what? You expect me not to eat before lunch? You got to be crazy. But we've learned how to get our body to utilize the food that it has stored, which is the toxins and the fat cells. We've been taught that you've got to eat 3 meals a day, and we were taught growing up, CC, the breakfast of champions, toast, cereal, and orange juice, all turns to sugar, all causes cellular inflammation. We've been sold a bill of goods, and the cornflakes and such themselves were so loaded with preservatives that those started our demise and started our body's weakness. And then we ended up with clogged livers because they can no longer clean the blood well enough. And we go down a dwindling spiral of ill health. So I think the thing is that you would I'd recommend taking a look at is what's the one thing that you would like to improve in your life right now? Maybe it's being able to walk up or downstairs. Maybe it's being able to have more energy. Maybe it's would be able to do more things with your hands, more fine motions with your hands, or take a walk on a trail or on the beach. So in my book, Turn Back Your Biological Clock, you can actually list out what it is that you're trying to do. Also, much more simple, go to my website, mccollumwellness.com. There's a couple courses you can take. A 30-day reset, really great. It will help you reset the types of foods you're putting in your body. So your body will actually start to break down the bad stuff. Your body has this amazing process called autophagy, autophagy. Phagy means to eat. So your body will eat itself when it doesn't have other food to eat. And the cool part about autophagy, if you set your body up right, it's going to eat the bad cells first and leave the good ones. It's very sparing. The body's goal is to survive. So it will eat these bad cells, the senescent or senile or zombie cells you might have heard about. Zombie cells are just cells that are useless. They've done their due diligence. They've done whatever they do, and now they're just loafers, just sitting around waiting for, nothing. And they start to rot, just like an apple in a bowl of apples. When that one apple rots, it takes the next one and the next one and the next one, and that's how you get things like cancer or other kind of chronic diseases. Your body has a mechanism to clean that up. It's called autophagy. And we can force autophagy through processes of fasting. That's one of the best ways to do it. There's other ways, of course, as well. Diet variation is really key. Realize that we have seasons. Around California, we don't. We can eat whatever we want, whenever we want, as much as we want, with whoever we want. But, you want to start to learn about changing the diet because it will change the microbiome or the bugs in your gut to make them work better in digesting the foods you get and eliminating the bad stuff. And so that's really important that you know what to eat and when to eat. There's a lot of other things that you can do, like the fasting is very important, diet variation. Um, and then you got to look at what's making your body sick in the first place. So I always kind of take a look, especially when I'm working with people with peripheral neuropathy, which we turn around pretty quickly. But if you were in a boat and you're out in the middle of the ocean and there's no land, so you can't swim to shore, the boat is sinking. You have two choices, bail the boat out or plug the hole. Well, it might make sense to plug the hole, but if you can't find it and you don't know where it is or how many there are, the boat may sink before you get it. So you got to bail the boat out and get it floating before you plug the hole. So in natural health, our first thing is to help you with whatever your symptomatology is, but we don't want to stop at just getting the symptoms covered. We spend 70% of $4.7 trillion a year on covering up symptoms. That's healthcare in this country. 70% of that goes to covering up symptoms. You need to get your symptoms handled or reverse the problem, especially if with peripheral neuropathy or different types of arthritis or degenerative diseases. You have to try to arrest that first. And there's, depending on what it is, ways to do that. And then, and only then, but actually at the same time, you do want to start to find the hole and plug it. But you can't do one without the other. Now, you could go to my website, mccollumwellness.com. It's either on there or McCollum Family Chiropractic, and download our neurotoxic questionnaire and email it into us. And I'll take a look at it for you, and we'll have my staff contact you and say, hey, it looks like you might want to have a conversation with Dr. McCollum on this, and or your condition looks like you need to go to a different type of practitioner. But if I think I can help you, I will. And we work remotely with people all over the country and even other countries. So I have a breadth of information. We have amazing machines at our office. We have a sound machine, which is called the soft wave therapy or tissue regenerative therapy machine. It's a lithotripsy machine that breaks up scar tissue in the body. The sound comes out at 3,358 miles an hour. goes right through healthy tissue and bumps into bad tissue, breaks it up and brings your own stem cells that your body still makes to the area so it can get healthier. We also have um, several different color lasers, cold lasers, and the lasers basically ignite the mitochondria, which is the carburetor of the cell. And when the laser hits the mitochondria, it charges the cell up to give it more energy so that the cell can heal quicker. It's like when sun hits your arm, you get vitamin D, or a leaf, you get chlorophyll. When the spectrum of the lasers hit your skin, it creates energy in the mitochondria. It's all proven. You can look it up on PubMed. I'm getting a new hydrowave machine pretty soon that's also got a much more focused beam. We do a lot of different things with peripheral neuropathy. We have people get biofeedback machines and infrared machines they can use at home. We have vibe plates at our office and something called PEMF. I mean, my point is there's a lot that I do and invest in to try to get better results for the people that need it. So at any rate, you can, whatever your problem is, there's different, or your health condition is, that if you find the one you want to improve on, do that one first. And oftentimes a lot of others follow. So we've got just a couple minutes left here. I'd say get the book, Turn Back Your Biological Clock. It's a real fun read. I had a real amazing uh, recommendation from a patient who read it because it's written as a story. So it's a really interesting story of a guy that gets his health back, and there's a little romance in it. But at the same time, it does that. It tells you step by step how to turn back your biological clock. You can do this by yourself, but there may be things you need help with. And that's where filling out the neurotoxic questionnaire, all that stuff's in there. You can get a hold of us that way. But this coming week, for some of you that might be interested, I'm going to be doing a radio show with I think it's the president of the military's Order of the Purple Heart. So the Military Order of the Purple Heart was actually started by George Washington. And it's all of the wounded veterans are part of this Purple Heart thing now. And there's a huge story about it. I mean, um, a little bit before me, the generation of my brother's kids, our friends and neighbors, they all went to Vietnam, a lot of them, and they came back in bad shape. And there's been recent wars, people come back, and oftentimes they're not welcomed very well, or people don't know how to help them. So and there's a terrible stuff going on with them and their mental states, and that sometimes they take their own lives too often. So I'm doing a show with this organization to talk about some of the things that they've found that help these of injured veterans, and it's called The Way to Happiness. And they've been utilizing this for quite a while now, and they're seeing huge changes. And this being the year it is, 275 years since the founding of our country, I thought this would be a good time to honor the veterans and actually be able to get the word out on things that people can do to help not only veterans, but themselves. Because there's three aspects of health. There's the mental, there's physical and chemical. Now, I spent quite a bit of time this show talking about the chemical issues, problems with people. And, that's all the cellular inflammation, the toxins that we consume and get. I've also talked about my story in chiropractic and how I broke my back and how getting pressure off the nerve allowed me to be functioning and pain-free at this point at 69, and, helping people still in my office. And then there's the mental aspect, which this show is going to address. And of course, I talk about vitamin G, gratitude, 100% gratitude. And you can get bottles of gratitude. It's on my website. It talks about, how to use it, how to help actually, wake up in the morning and think of 10 things that you're grateful for. Share gratitude with the first 10 people you meet. And then direction number 3 is repeat often. We know by doing this exercise, it helps mental acuity. It helps increase your serotonin, dopamine, and oxytocin, the feel-good transmitters, makes you more likable, actually makes you more productive, decreases inflammation in the body. Actually, when you express gratitude and get those hormones going, it will decrease the inflammation, which is causing so much chronic disease. So you need to put that into your daily business, and then just keep sharing more and more and more with other people. But I'm here to help. And, my office is in Capitola, California. I've been in practice 35 years now. Our office number there is 831-459-9990, 831-459-9990. You can always reach me at info@mccollumwellness.com, info@mccollumwellness.com. And then you can go to my websites, mccollumwellness.com for nutritional stuff, mccollumfamilychiropractic.com for brick and mortar things. I have a podcast with over 200 messages on it, hour-long shows, and that's called McCollum Wellness Radio. My YouTube channel is Dr. Duncan McCollum. Please join it and follow it. It will help me get the word out to more people. I'm on TikTok. I'm on everything. I don't know how to do any of it, but my staff does it for me. Because if there's one person out there that gets a message today and we change their life a little bit, then it's been worth me being here for you today. So I've got about a minute and a half left. Tune in next week. You can always get my shows on my Dr. Duncan or my Dr. Duncan McCollum YouTube channel. They're all there. If you miss the show with the Military Order of the Purple Heart next week, it will be up there shortly thereafter. By probably Tuesday of next week, you can get on there and find out how you can help these veterans, and what this whole thing is I'm talking about, how useful it will be. And then I will be working with, be bringing another gentleman on who I've had before, Dr. Fred Shaw, who grew out of the Bronx. He was a Crip, or a Blood or a Crip, either one, and he survived. He actually is very successful, and he's going to talk about drugs in street drugs, and of course, my story, I was almost killed me, and so we'll have him on in a few weeks, and he's going to tell his story and how he is working out in these neighborhoods with kids to help them get off of these drugs and give them hope. So that should be a great show as well. I'm looking to bring on some more speakers as the time goes on here. So I really appreciate y'all. You can catch my shows at 1 o'clock on Saturdays, and then 3 o'clock here on Mondays. So other than that, it's been great talking with you today. I hope this was helpful. Please go get my book and sign up to my YouTube channel. And we will see you next week. Thank you.